Could you tell us something about we're at the conference here that's on the Ellen White biography in Portland, Maine at the Regency Hotel. Could you tell our readers something about the book project?
Well, a little over 2 years ago, several Adventist historians contacted me because years ago I had written a book-length study of Ellen White, the founder of the Seventh-day Adventists, and they wanted to know if I would collaborate with them on a conference and maybe a book or books about Ellen White. And that was the start of a very interesting collaboration, and we decided maybe we should go for one book, and a book that could be published by a non-Adventist press and that would expose Ellen White to a larger audience. Because she's one of the major religious leaders in the history of the United States and is very little known. Everybody knows about Joseph Smith and the Mormons. Very few people know about Ellen White and the Seventh-day Adventists, who are worldwide bigger than the Mormons.
Yeah, it's 15 million, is that right?
Well, it depends on whether you count baptized members or Seventh-day Adventists generally, like young people who haven't been baptized but are in Adventist families. So sometimes you get a figure if they're including people who are involved with the denomination, 20 million, and it's 14 or 15 million baptized members, I think, worldwide. Mormons have more in the United States than the Seventh-day Adventists, but the Seventh-day Adventists have been doing better internationally.
And why? I mean, it's strange. Why is that people wouldn't know? Are there certain things that are peculiar to Adventism that makes it hard for people to understand or fit into the narrative?
Well, I think general historians, American historians, have always been intrigued with the Mormons, who captured a region of the country. Adventists were dispersed all over the country and never had any. And they sort of shied away from any political power, and they believed strongly in separation of church and state. So she just never became a major figure. If non-Adventist historians discuss the history of Adventism, they talked about William Miller,
right,
and his prediction that the world would end on October 22, 1844. And the Seventh-day Adventists, led by Ellen White, were a splinter movement from the Millerites.
Right. Is there an Adventist politics?
By that you mean what?
I mean, could you, in America, say today or even mid 20th century, were Adventists all over the map politically, or did they kind of fit into a certain political mold?
They're not all over the map. You could find some distribution. Adventists have tended to be fairly conservative politically, to be in recent decades more Republican than Democratic. They have some big issues. One is that they're anti-labor union. I mean, some people would say you couldn't be an Adventist and a member of a union. And anti-urban. So there's been a tilt away from the Democratic Party. They're also rabidly, historically anyway, anti-Catholic. So they believe that the Pope changed the true Sabbath to Sunday, and that the Seventh-day Adventist Church, are kind of the last holdout in the Christian community still observing God's true Sabbath. So you could see that might put them at odds with the mainstream Democratic Party in recent decades.
Oh yeah, those two things, labor, three things, and Catholicism and anti-urban. If you were to try to say, I know it's difficult to sum up what sort of impact Adventism has had on American history, but if you were to try to tell someone who knew nothing about Adventism how Adventism had shaped America, what would you say?
Well, it's to a great extent been very insular. and especially culturally. But there are two major exceptions here. One is breakfast. The founder of the church embraced, as a result of a vision, what was called hydropathy in the 19th century, rejected mainstream medicine for the water cure, and vegetarianism and natural things. And over the years, that became a system internationally of hospitals and other medically related institutions. Her most famous protege, a kid she and her husband put through medical school even, and he lived with it, he was almost like a foster kid, although his parents were alive, was somebody named John Harvey Kellogg, who became superintendent then of the Battle Creek Sanitarium, and invented flake cereals. At one point he offered the rights to the church, and Ellen White didn't particularly like those cereals, so she recommended turning it down. So he turned them over to his brother, W.K. Kellogg, who's made a fair amount of money from that. He is also arguably the inventor of peanut butter, although maybe people squished peanuts a long time ago, but he was the one who really put it on the map. So he's been very influential in terms of health reform and medical work. So that's one way, and change the breakfast habits of America. Another way that she would never have known before she died in 1915, but at a time when most evangelical Christians were accepting the evidence of the history of life on earth, she had a vision. God took her back in vision actually to witness the creation. And it was in 6 24-hour periods. So Adventists got locked into young earth creationism.
That was early on, too. I mean, isn't that much earlier than most fundamentalists and evangelicals get?
Oh, yeah. By 1840, most evangelicals were no longer fighting over the age of the earth or even the geological activity of the flood. It happened, but it didn't do anything geologically. For young earthers, they have to make the flood geologically significant. That's where, in the 1 year of the flood, is how they account for all the geological column. And so in the late 19th and very early 20th century, the Adventists were virtually alone in trying to harmonize the scientific evidence with this. And especially through a disciple called George McCready Price, this became an alternative to other theories of origins. He was very prominent, Price, in the 1920s, but nobody really accepted this alternative interpretation of Scripture until in 1961, two card-carrying fundamentalists named Henry Morris and John Whitcomb Jr. published a book called The Genesis Flood, which took Price's, i.e. Ellen White's view of the origin that made Noah's flood central to the earth history. And that was just immensely influential in conservative Christian circles.